Okay, here we go. It is Tuesday, January 21st. It's really cold here in Queens, New York. We will recap the college football championship. We discuss the Bears hiring Ben Johnson as their new head coach. We will discuss some NBA and NHL trade rumors, and Anthony Santander is the latest major free agent in baseball to find a new team. This is the Early Game Podcast. Listen to the show in the mornings on your commute, whenever and wherever, so you can be a part of today's sports conversations. Let's go. Okay, so we start out in the college football playoff, something we've been talking about what seems like for months now, and it has been a little over a month. More than a month. And the new expanded college football playoff came to a close last night with Notre Dame and Ohio State. Notre Dame opened the scoring. They marched down the field. They had a 10-minute drive to open the game. They had a touchdown. They made it 7-0. They actually looked pretty impressive on that opening drive. But Ohio State then scored 21 unanswered, and they go into the half up 21-7. Quinshon Judkins scored 3 touchdowns for Ohio State. Notre Dame clawed their way back into this one, but ultimately Ohio State won 34-23. Will Howard was really solid for Ohio State here. Threw for 231 yards, 2 touchdowns. Look, Ohio State was always winning this game. They were clearly the better team. Good for Notre Dame, by the way. Fun team. Fun drive. You know, they gave their fans something to cheer about after ultimately losing, and inevitably they were going to lose. But they gave their fans something to cheer about on that first drive. The thing that I can't stop thinking about, I've mentioned this on the show before, I love this narrative about Michigan winning last year and Ohio State winning this year. Now, I know Michigan beat Ohio State in the before the college football playoff, right before, and that actually really affected the seeding for Ohio State. But now think about this for a second. So say there was not the college football playoff, the expanded one. So Ohio State would have lost to Michigan, been ranked the 8th seed at that point, and would not have made the playoff with the 10-team expansion. They would have been the 8th seed. This is what's great for college football. The fact that, on one hand, you have 2 Big Ten rivalries winning back-to-back years. Not the regular season games don't matter as much as they do when Ohio State and Michigan play each other. And so, yes, we got Ohio State losing to Michigan this year, but because of the expanded playoff, Ohio State now is able to say that they won the entire thing. They were the 8th seed. And by the way, Notre Dame was the 7th seed. So, all in all, very fun. Great parody. If we want to call the expanded playoff a money grab, fine. Ultimately, that's what it was. But at the same time, it works out amazingly for everyone. The fans of college football were entertained. We have a story spanning an entire year for the Big Ten. A narrative spanning an entire year for the Big Ten. So as much as we hear about the SEC, how great that is, how much of a historic conference that is for college football, we have an amazing rivalry continuing right in front of our eyes because of the expansion of the college football playoff. Okay. Let's move on. So, the big story in the NFL yesterday was surrounding Ben Johnson. 2 days after a crushing loss to the Commanders, Ben Johnson finds a new home with the Chicago Bears. He was the offensive coordinator for the Lions. They scored 31 points in that game against the Commanders, but he leaves with a bad taste in his mouth because he lost to the 6th seed as the 1 seed. Yes, he's just an offensive coordinator. I get that. But the way he's been sought after for years now makes it seem like he is more than just not an OC. He is regarded higher than most coordinators are. He's now been in the coaching cycle for 2 years, and he is probably one of the pickiest coaching candidates we've seen in a long time. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. He's just been very selective. And actually, I'll say that's a good thing. Put yourself in a situation where you think you'll succeed. And so now he moves on from Jared Goff to Caleb Williams. And we can look at this from so many different angles. As I said, he's been sought after for years, but this opportunity seems right for him. Bears fans, soak this in. This was an opportunity Ben Johnson wanted. He has been the most sought after coach for years, and he has chosen you. Congratulations. After all that Bears fans have gone through the last couple of years, with Matt Nagy, Matt Eberflus, man, they got it right here. And on top of that, this was the best case scenario for Caleb Williams. Ben Johnson gets a great raw talent to mold. Caleb Williams gets someone who has been there and done that. He has taken a bad offense and recreated it to be successful. That is exactly what you want. You want someone that has seen adversity as an offensive coordinator, because they can get creative trying to fix the issues. And so the Lions as a whole, they were a team that each year progressively got better and better. And so whether it's Ben Johnson, whether it's Aaron Glenn, you are looking at two coordinators who know how to take something that was not working and progressively make it better. Now, what does this mean for the Detroit Lions? Is this bad for their future? If you think about it, Ben Johnson realized it was never going to work with him as the offensive coordinator in Detroit. As good as he was with Goff, he felt like he could not win there. The reason why he stayed the last few years was because he thought that was a situation where he would eventually be able to win. Look how fast, after the Lions exited the playoffs, he signed. He tried so many times to make it work with the Lions and to win there. But ultimately, he can't keep running it back. And honestly, this may be a win-win for both sides. The Lions can now move on, maybe find a different approach offensively. They clearly have the players in place, both offensively and defensively. But maybe now they find a coordinator or coordinators, if Aaron Glenn decides to leave, who can figure out how to make this group of players go to the next level. That's not a knock on Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn. Sometimes the dynamic just isn't right. They were a game away from the Super Bowl last year. They got upset this year. And again, as I've mentioned so many times on this show, they have gotten better each and every year. But it's possible they just need different voices. it is possible they need someone to come in, motivate them in a different way, talk to them in a different way, go about their business in a different way. Now, the thing that I was thinking about, the last angle I was thinking about here, was what about Tom Brady and the Raiders? There were so many rumors about Ben Johnson being Tom Brady's number one choice. I said it then, I got hate for it, and I'll say it now. Just because Tom Brady was a great quarterback, that does not make him a great broadcaster, and that also does not make him a great football executive. The role of football executive does not only entail finding the right guys to fill your organization with, it's also about convincing those great players to be a part of your organization. Everybody knew Ben Johnson was who Tom Brady wanted. Yet, here we are. Ben Johnson is not the head coach of the Raiders. You know, people were talking about on that, because Tom Brady did the game on Saturday, the Lions-Commanders game, and everybody was talking about how Tom Brady was specifically not saying anything about Ben Johnson in that game. This is why you let professionals do it, people who have been doing it for years. This is why you let them take care of these types of things. You let them do it because they've done it before. They have experience negotiating. What kind of experience does Tom Brady have negotiating? Zero, essentially, himself. He's had agents do it for him. Can't bring his agent in to convince Ben Johnson to go to the Raiders. It's so obvious that this is ridiculous that he is the one making the decisions for the Raiders, on top of the fact he's the one still broadcasting. On WFAN in New York, they were killing him for it, and they were right. And so now the Bears have their guy, the Raiders do not, and the Lions need to figure out what they're going to do as their offensive coordinator. Okay, let's move on. Let's do some NBA here. And I guess I'll just start out by saying both the NBA and the NHL have their trade deadlines approaching. But specifically for the NBA, one team that we've spoken about is the Cleveland Cavaliers. I have said they are pretenders, and I have gotten kickback for that. One of the reasons I think they're pretenders is because they're essentially the same team as the last few seasons, and that are overperforming now. They're the same roster. Kenny Atkinson is getting more out of them. But in my mind, that just is the exact equation for a pretender, where you are the same team, you overperform in the regular season, but then once 7-game series start in the playoffs, it's hard to run that back. So I think if they want to make an actual run this season, they need to add more impact players. And by the way, they won big again yesterday. They beat Phoenix 118-92. So they're 32-6 on the season. Everyone has a good reason to tell me I'm being ridiculous here. But still, I think they need to add an impact player or players. And the area that they clearly need help, they clearly need improvement, is size. They need bigger players. And that was evident last week against the Thunder. They got totally outsized. And it was clear after that game, and I said it after that game, that they would not be able to compete with these teams with much better size than they have. But one name that's been reported that they're connected to is Cam Johnson of the Brooklyn Nets. Now, he's averaging 19.6 points per game. He's shooting 43% from three. And the Cavs need size like Cam Johnson. He's 6'8". And as much as I've called them pretenders, I think if they can add that type of size to their roster, they'd be able to match up better with teams like the Thunder. They'd be able to match better with teams like the Celtics. And honestly, inevitably, the Knicks, if they get Mitch Robinson back, their size will be better than the Cavs too. So when healthy, they would also outsize the Cavs. This would be the type of move which I think would move or start to move the Cavs from pretenders to contenders. Okay, let's move on. As I said, we have some NHL stuff too. And they also have some trade deadline rumors. So, we've spoken about how the Canucks are looking to trade a few players. And it was reported today that they were close to trading JT Miller to the Rangers this past Saturday. Apparently, it's close enough that the Canucks were considering not dressing him for their game. That trade would have seen them flip Pete Alonso and Ryan Lindgren back to the Canucks, as well as picks. Now, the Rangers have actually been playing pretty well lately. JT Miller is the biggest player, the biggest name so far in trade discussions for this trade deadline. That being said, as a Ranger fan myself, are we really going to mortgage everything? I understand they've been playing well lately, but we're really going to trade picks? We're in cap hell even next year. So we're going to trade picks while we're starting to play well. We're going to trade picks for JT Miller? Makes no sense. This might be a turning point for this team. A team that we've seen be consistent for the last decade. Yeah, they had a bit of a rebuild for a couple years. A couple years they didn't make the playoffs, but ultimately they've been rock solid. They haven't won a Stanley Cup, but they've been rock solid. And now we're going to mortgage the future for JT Miller? I get it, he's good. Not worth giving up picks. Especially when we're in cap hell. Okay. One more thing in the NHL. So Connor McDavid was suspended 3 games for a cross-check on Canucks player Connor Garland. It was a 3-2. The game was 3-2 Canucks. Oilers were pushing with seconds left in the game. McDavid got tangled with Garland, and he just cross-checked him in the face. You just can't do that. Go look at the replay. I reposted it on the early game X. I get it. You're the captain. You want to set the tone. But first of all, that's a dangerous play. It's an insane play. I get it if you want to be feisty, but that's way too much. Second, you're pushing and have momentum. You're down 1 goal. You have the momentum on your side. They had the Canucks pinned in their defensive zone. They are playing on their heels. In that moment, you cannot let emotions get the best of you. That's not how you lead a team as captain. You're the captain, and now you need to sit out 3 games. You're one of the best players in hockey, and you need to sit out 3 games. You want to be physical as the leader. You want to lay down the law. But as captain, as a face of the league, you need to be more careful than that. You can't afford to miss 3 games for your team. You just can't be that physical. Cross-check in that way. Okay. Let's move on to baseball. And it was reported yesterday that Anthony Santander agreed to a deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. So it's a deal. It's 5 years, $92 million, an opt-out after year 3. The opt-out can be voided by adding a 6th year, by the Blue Jays adding a 6th year. At that point, he would be making $110 million. And so there were rumors last week about the Blue Jays' interest in Pete Alonso. They inevitably signed Santander. And they've been linked to Santander this whole offseason. They've been one of the teams looking to add a bat. They were heavy on Juan Soto. And they end up adding Santander. And I saw, obviously, when the Cubs traded for Kyle Tucker, I saw so many comparisons from Kyle Tucker to Juan Soto. And I saw also, they said that Santander and Soto both have 198 extra base hits in the last 2 years. I think that was the stat. So if you're a Blue Jays fan and you're listening, I hope that stat makes you feel good. And this is a fine move. His 814 OPS last season was the only time he was over 800 in his whole career besides 2020. That year, I think he had 839. He hit 44 home runs last season, which was also the most of his career. He had the next highest he had was 33, and that was the only other time he had over 30. And he's entering his age 31 season, which in 2025 in Major League Baseball is a death sentence. Look, it is a nice move, but the chances are he will regress. Chances are Blue Jays fans will not get what they wanted in terms of production from an offseason addition. He will likely come back to earth next season. The chances that he repeats his 2024 campaign are slim. But he now slots as their second best power hitter. And if the Blue Jays decide to trade Vladdy, Santander is now their biggest power threat. It seemed inevitable that after all the misses the Blue Jays have had in free agency, they would overpay for somebody, and that somebody turned out to be Anthony Santander. They missed out on Ohtani last season. They missed out on Soto and Sasaki this season. And so this move almost feels like it was to save face for their organization. It's a nice move, don't get me wrong. But this whole last year has shown that there is a hesitancy to play in Toronto if you are a superstar. If you are a free agent, not from already playing with the Blue Jays, there is some hesitation. Ohtani, he entertained it. Sasaki entertained it. Soto entertained it. But when push comes to shove, and you have organizations like the Dodgers, like the Yankees, more recently like the Mets, who are going to outbid you, going to out-history you, you're not going to come out on top. And I've never been to Toronto. I've heard great things. I'm sure it's a beautiful city. I'm sure it's a beautiful place to live. But unfortunately, they are losing these battles. And there's a different element to this for the Blue Jays and for their fans. They are in ongoing talks with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. about a continued relationship, about extending him. And this move seemed like a desperation move because they are nervous that they're going to lose out on Vladdy and they are going to want to trade him. And so now Santander comes in. He is their number one power hitter, potentially going into next season unless Vladdy stays. And frankly, if they don't extend him, Santander looks to be their number one power hitter after the 2025 season. Look, the AL East has gotten a lot better this offseason. The Yankees got better. The Red Sox got better. The Orioles are still really good. And never count the Rays out. It's just going to be very tough for the Blue Jays to compete. Are they the third best team in a perfect world? They're maybe a little better than the Orioles. I don't think so. I'm just saying that give them a little hope. They're the fourth or fifth best team in this division. They just are. It is going to be really tough for the Blue Jays to compete. I understand them doing whatever they can to add to their team. But this just doesn't seem it. Now, there's another angle to this, and we've spoken at length. But there is now an update to the Pete Alonso saga. For weeks, the only team involved in Pete Alonso was the New York Mets. Last week, it was reported that the Blue Jays have entered the mix. It seems almost impossible now that they would sign Pete Alonso on top of Santander. They have their power bat. I have never, in all my years following baseball, seen a player fumble their free agency in the way Pete Alonso has, in the way Scott Boras has for Pete Alonso. He just lost the only other suitor he's had in weeks. Days after it was reported, they were a suitor for him. Days after Scott Boras was able to convince the Blue Jays to let him put their name out there. I don't know where Pete Alonso goes from here. Even if he signs a 1-year prove-it deal, what? All of a sudden, next offseason, they're going to say, well, he's a year older. Let's give him the years he wanted last offseason. Let's give him the money he wanted last offseason. Excuse me for another Mets rant here. I'm tired of fans blaming ownership for not signing Pete Alonso. Why should they? It makes no sense. No team wants him. Not one team. Even if you want to say he's going to be good, and we're looking about it wrong. We're evaluating him wrong. It's unfair. I saw Vinny Pasquantino yesterday say, they should be looking at more than just the WAR at what he's brought to the Mets. Then you sign him. Tell the Royals they should sign him. Big talker. Tell the Royals they should sign him if it's more than WAR. If it's more than numbers. It is a business. In the business, they need to be predictive. No team, not one single team, likes what they see in Pete Alonso. Every other team preferred short-term deals. The Yankees preferred Paul Goldschmidt, who's 55, to Pete Alonso. So, as the Mets, for me, I should be the one to give him the money just because he hit one nice home run? Yeah, it was a great moment. Yeah, he's provided many great moments. And if he comes back, he'll be the all-time home run leader. This is insane that it's the Mets' responsibility to be the team to overpay for Pete Alonso. And it's insane that people think this is some ownership issue, that the Mets haven't signed Pete Alonso and they haven't brought in another bat. Again, I'll reiterate, the Mets, every other team in baseball, they're 2 months out till the season starts. Stop judging the teams on their off seasons. Wait until opening day. Sit down with a notepad and a pen. List every player your team has added, every player they've gotten rid of. Give me a paragraph on whether you like the moves, whether you don't like the moves. Don't do it on January 21st. When it's 16 degrees outside and we can't even go, and you wouldn't even be able to play baseball outside. Man, nothing bothers me more. All right, that's the show. Thanks for listening. Make sure you follow on Spotify, comment, like, subscribe on YouTube. Have a fantastic day. This was the Early Game Podcast.